We're starting Be'ezus Hashem Sefer Nezikin. The Rambam starts off every Sefer with a pasuk with the words also B'Shem Hashem Keil Elam. So he says B'Shem Hashem Keil Elam Hat Libi Elet Visecha Va'alel Botza, which Hashtas Hagdama to Sefer Nezikin, which also has Hilchas Gneva and Hilchas Gzela. So Hat Libi Elet Visecha Va'alel Botza Sefer Achadosar V'hu Sefer Nezikin Hilches of Chomish V'Zeu Siduran. Hilchas Nizkei Mamon, Hilchas Gneva, Hilchas Gzela V'Aveda, Hilchas Chevel Umazik, and Hilchas Ritzeach U'Shmiras Nefesh. And the Rambam's Meduyik, we have that the Rambam over here right away when he mentions all of the 5 halachas that he's going to discuss in this sefer, he already mentions all the mitzvahs of these 5 halachas. There's a list of all the mitzvahs in each of these 5 halachas, and then the Rambam again starts with the particular halacha Hilchas Nizkei Mamon, of how many mitzvahs there is in Hilchas Nizkei Mamon. Hilchas Nizkei Mamon yesh bechlolon arba mitzvahs asay v'zo proton. Aleph, din asher, beis din haver. So over here, sher means keren, and haver means shein v'regel. And those in the Mishnah when it says asher v'aber v'amav v'haver, so over there there's a machlekes. If ton asher lekarnei umav l'shinei, or ton asher v'chol mila d'sher, and maver refers to Adam. But Lepel, that's all, in the Mishnah, there could be an argument about it. But over here in Rambam, where the Rambam has two halachas, there's halachas Hilchas Nizkei Mamon, and then there's going to be other halachas of Hilchas Chevel Umazik. So obviously, Sher, when it says Sher and Hever, so Sher refers to Keren, and Hever refers to Shein V'Regel, and Gimel is Din Haber, and Dalet Din Ha'avor, the Dinim of Eish. So it's a mitzvah. So these 4 halachas of Mazik is called a mitzvah. But Pashtus, the mitzvah is to be done in these 4 mazikim, the way the din atera, it's a din like a mitzvah on bezin. It's a mitzvah on bezin. Ubir mitzvah seilu b'prokamelu peirik rishon. Kol nefesh chaya, shehi b'rshusi shalodam, shehi zika. It's a nefesh chaya, we're talking about a live nefesh, which is b'rshusi shalodam, which is in the person's possession. In b'rshus is under his jurisdiction, it's under his domain, so to speak, b'rshusi shalodam and shehi zika. So the din is habaylim chayav mushalom shari momenam hizik shenamar kishigach sheri sheriyehu. So we learn our echad asher ve'echad shar behem chayav ve'ev le'dibur akasid b'sher elu beheva. So be'emes every so from the words kiyigach sher ish sheriyehu and yochayav behezik, we learn now this yisod that if it's a nefesh chaya which is b'rshusi shalodam, so and it was mazik, so habaylim chayav mushalom. Now, there's Yadua, there's the Chikira and Baba Kama. What's the gather of Shir Mazik? What's the din of Bamena Shezik? Is the Yisod Advarim is because it's your moment that was Mazik? It's just that if you were Shamer, so then you're like an onus, since if you were a Shamer and still it was Mazik. So there's a Ptur onus, or Fakert, or Be'emes, it's not Pshat, because your moment was Mazik, that's where you chayiv. Since it's your moment, so normally you have a Chiyav Shmira. And if you weren't Shamer, so for not being Shamer, that's where you chayiv to pay. Is the Yisei Dachiv because of the Heder Hashmira? That's the Yisei Dachiv. Or the Yisei Dachiv is because it's Mamene Shehizik. It's just that if there was a Shmira, there would be a Ptur, but not the Yisei Dachiv is the Heder Hashmira. Fakir, the Shmira would make a Ptur. So there are some, there are Chreinim, the Even Ozl is Medayik from this Lashon HaRambam, that the Rambam fears Sharei Momenam Hizik, that from the Rambam, Lashon HaRambam is Mashma the Pashtus, that the Yisei Dachiv is Mamene Shehizik. But on the other hand, there has to be Bershusi Shalodam. Whereas if it's not Bershusi Shalodam, so then the Mele you can't be Shemer. In those Lechura, Kol Nefesh Chaya She Bershusi Shalodam. If it's not Bershusi, so that you're not really in a position to be Shemer it. Let's say you gave it over to a Shemer, which is no longer Bershusi Shalodam. So then you don't have that Chiyuv of Mammon Amazik. So again, the Chiyuv is not because it's Bershusi and you have a Chiyuv Shmira. The Chiyuv is because it's Mammon Amazik. It's just that in order to be obligated for Mammon Amazik, it has to be B'Shusi Shalodam in order for it, you shouldn't have a Ptur, that you're an honest, so to speak. There's other Diyukim, there are other Steiner, even in the Rambam, that's L'chura Mashma Fakert. But I'll call upon, that's the Lashon. Let's read again the Lashon. Kol Nefesh Chaya, Shehi B'Shusi Shalodam, Shehi Zika. A Nefesh Chaya, which is B'Shusi Shalodam, where Shusi Shalodam means it's in his Rishus. Pashtus says they didn't make a shamer for it, it's still in his Rishus. Shehi Zika is Habaylim Chayav Mushalim, Sharei Momenam Hizik, Shenamar Kiyigev Sheri Sheriyehu. So we learn out Echad Asher, the Echad Shar Behem Chayav Ve'ev, and Lidibur Akasa B'Sher El Beheva. Now the din is Lepel that Hashemer is nichnas tachas habaylam. That lapel, if someone is mekabel chiyuv shmira, so he's nichnas to tachas habaylam. So you have to understand how that works. Whereas if you say that chiyuv is because it's momenum hizik, so how does this shemer? What's the gather of the chiyuv of the shemer? I'll call upon halacha base. V'kama mishalim. So how much do you pay for nefesh chaya shaladim which is b'shusi shaladim sheizika? V'kama mishalim. So the general rule is as a imi zika v'dvarim shedarko la'seisem tomid kiminig briyas. So something which is regular for it to do. Ki gain behema shachla tevin the omer it ate hay or the stalks of the tvua. Eishi zika biragla b'derech hilucha. So then it's chayev l'shalem nezik shalim, number one, and min hayafa shebin chasav. He has to pay a nezik shalim, and he has to pay min hayafa shebin chasav, which means from idius. Shenamar meitav sodeo meitav karmi yishalem, as we'll learn behemshech. However, that's talking about if it did a normal type of hezek. However, vim shinsa v'osa maisim she'ein darko la'seisum tamid v'yizika bem. It did something which was unusual for it to do. Kigein sher shenogach inoshach. So then it's chayiv l'shalom chatzi nezik, not a nezik shalom, but a chatzi nezik, and that chatzi nezik doesn't come in a yafish ben chosav or bechlam ben chosav. It only comes miguf hamazik atzmi. It comes from the guf hamazik. Shenemar u'mochru is asher achai v'chotzer is kaspi v'gemer. Ketzad sher shava mona shenogach l'sher shava esrim vehimisei v'harei nevela shava arba. So be'etzim the hezek was 16. And we're talking about a share that was nagach, and he pays a chatzi nezik migufei. So the din is bala share chayiv l'shalem shmeina shu chatzi nezik. So the obligation for the hezek of 16 and only 8, and ve'eni chayiv l'shalem ela miguf hasher shehizik. And you only have to pay from the guf hasher. You don't have to go into your pocket or to take other monies. Only miguf hasher shehizik. Shenamar u'mochrus hasher achai and lefichach. So it comes out bepel. Over here we're talking about a share shavim manu. There was nogach a share shavim esrim, and the hezek was in ganzen 16. So there's only a chiyuv of 8, so there's enough money in the share. The fichach imheim share shavim esrim, the share shavim masayim unvanavela shavim manu. So the hezek was 100, and memela the chiyuv is 50, and the ganzen share is only worth 20. Is ein ban and the vela yochalem alabalachai 10 lichamishim because lepel that's chatzia hezek of 100. You could take the whole share. The whole share is worth 20. I feel even if it would be worth very little. Dinner. So if we're dealing with something which is a davar she'ein darka la'seisi tomid kiminig briyasa, so then the chiyuv is only a chatzi nezik, and the chatzi nezik is migufa. Halacha dalet. Ha'oisa ma'isa shedarka la'seisi tomid kiminig briyasa is who anikra mu'it. When the behemoth does something which is regular for the behemoth to do, that would be referred to as being a mu'it. When the behemoth does something which is not regular for the behemoth, is who anikra tam. So that's the thing. There's a musik called a behemoth that does something which is regular for the behemoth is called a mu'it. A behemoth that does something which is irregular for the behemoth is called a tam. V'zah mishana, and lepel, this behemoth that was mishana that did something irregular, im hirgel b'shinuye pamim rabbis, as we'll learn b'hemshech how many times it has to happen, im hirgel b'shinuye pamim rabbis, so then nasa muad le'esid davar shehirgel b'shinamar ineda kisher nagachu. So there's a musik called a tam, which does something which is irregular, and there's a musik called a muad, which is something does that regular, and there's a musik called of a tam becoming a muad. A tam becoming a muad, which means that something that he does that's irregular, but he does it a number of times, so then it becomes for him regular, and then it becomes a muad. Halacha chamisha maisim tamim yesh bebeima. A behemoth has 5 types of acts, which to those 5 types of acts he would be called a tam. And if lepel she became a muad for one of them, in other words, those irregular acts she did a number of times. So then nasa muedes leisi ma'isa, she becomes a muad for that particular ma'isa. There's 5 ma'isa tam, so it's not the pshat if you become a muad, she's a muad for everything. She becomes a muad for that particular ma'isa which she started doing regularly. Ve'eluhein habehema eina muedes mitchilas elei ligach, not for ligicha, which is goring with the horns. V'lei ligef, and also not to push the animal with the body to push another, something to use its body to be mazik, and v'lei lishech, and to bite, and v'lei lirbeitz al kelim gedelim, and not to lie down on large kelim which would be irregular and break them and damage them, which would be irregular for the behemoth to lie down on large kelim, and also v'lei livet, not to kick. And lepeil b'emhuad le'echad mem, if she became a muad to one of these acts, to one of these 5 acts, is harei muad islay. So she's a muad for that act. So the behemoth is irregular for the behemoth to do any of these 5 acts, which is ligach, ligef, lishech, lirves, and livet. This is lirves is on kelim gdelim, and lepel, if she became a muad to one of these acts, so then she becomes a muad to that, and then she has to pay a nezek shalom for that act. Aval hashem, but the tooth of the animal is muedes mitchilasi lechelis haroyla, so that's regular for the behemoth to eat things which are regular for it. And al deras of a regel, the foot of the animal is muedes mitchilasi l'shaber b'derech chiluch. It's regular for the behemoth to damage while it's walking. By behemoth muedes mitchilasi also lirbeis al pachim ktanim ukiyetzivam ulamayachesam. In other words, if we're speaking about small kalim, where it's very regular for the behemoth to lie down and to just smash the small kalim with the small, to smash the small kalim, that's regular. The big kalim is irregular, and therefore he's considered a tam. Mashenkin, small kalim is regular. So generally we're speaking of behemoth. There's certain things that the behemoth is regular, certain things the behemoth is irregular, and mashenkin, if the behemoth does these irregular things, and it becomes a regular thing for this behemoth to do things that are for a normal behemoth irregular, so then the behemoth comes a tam. Now, chamisha mini behema muadim mitchilas briyasim lahazik. There are 5 types of behema which are matchilim muad mibriyasim lahazik, to go ahead and do damage, all types of damage. In other words, also intentional damage. Before, when we're talking about shein and regel are not intentional damage. The behemoth is not interested in being damaging. The behemoth is interested in eating, or the behemoth is just walking, and as the behemoth is walking, is causing damage. Then there's a behemoth, which a behemoth gores, a lishech. These are all maisim, which the behemoth is intentionally damaging. It's kavanos ilahazik. That's part of the gather of Karen, where it's kavanos ilahazik. So there are 5 types of behemoths that are muad to be kavanos ilahazik. That's muadim mitchilas briyasim lahazik, even in the way of kavanos ilahazik. Afilahim b'nei tarbus, even if the domesticated animals, in other words, they live in someone's home, but nevertheless, these 5 animals are considered regular for it to be mazik in the eifon of kavanos ilahazik. Lefichach im hiziku ehimisu b'negicha ebenashichu udrisu kietzben, for went ahead and it was damaged either by goring or by biting or by trotting on things, intentionally trotting on things, ukietzben, is chayav nezek shalom. Ve'elohein hazeev, which is a wolf, buhari, and a lion, bahadev, and a bear, bahanomer is a tiger, and bahabardulis is a leopard. So these animals are considered mu'adim mitchilosim, and they intentionally damage. V'chein hanochosh shenoshach, a snake that bit, is a reza muad hafilo hayben tarbas. Even we're dealing with domesticated ones that live in a house with people. Nevertheless, they're part of they're animals of the household. But nevertheless, when they do damage with kavanos lahazik, they're chayiv even the first time. Halacha zayin kol muad mishalem nezik sholem min hayafish ben chosaf v'chol tam mishalem chatzi nezik migufi. Look, the Rambam said this already before. I'm not sure why the Rambam is repeating it. Amedvar mamurim, this din that there's a chiyuv to pay when a muad, and al derez bayatam, a muad pays a nezik sholem min hayafish ben chosaf, and a tam pays a chatzi nezik migufei. Amedvar mamurim, the whole chiyuvim is b'shenichnusa habehema l'shus hanizik v'zikosei. If the mazik went to the l'shus hanizik v'zikosei, aval im nichnas hanizik, or as we'll learn behemshech also in l'shus harabim, if it's talking about a muad, aval im nichnas hanizik l'shus hamazik v'zikosei b'emtish balabayis, is a reza potter alakel sharei uemalei ilu lei nichnastu l'shusi lei higil l'chohezik. But in mefurish b'teira v'shilach has beirei ubir b'steyacher. So this is a pasuk was talking about shem v'regel. It was talking about b'negeh shem v'regel. That's the pasuk. So mainly we learn now that this din is only when the behemoth goes in to the sada hanizik. Masha'inkin fakert, if the behema of the nizik goes into the mazik, and the mazik goes ahead, and the behema of the mazik goes and is mazik, the behema of the nizik, so doesn't have to pay. So that's the first yisod, that there's no chiyuv to pay if the nizik goes into the shus of the mazik. Only if the mazik goes into the shus of the nizik. Now hizik or shus harabim. So now we have like this: if it's in the shus of the nizik, then he has to pay. If it's shus of the mazik, he doesn't have to pay. Now hizik or shus harabim, a bechotze she'ena shel shneim leila mazik a leila nizik, a bechotze shehi shel shneim. So we have three scenarios. We have a case where we deal with the Rishus Harabim. We have a case where it's a Chotza She'ena Shel Shneim, and then we have a Chotza Shehi Shel Shneim, and they both can put in whatever they want. They can put in behemoths, they can put in peiros, they can put in whatever they want. Kegein Habiko Kiyetziv, a place where there's a very empty space, a place of open fields. So this is a place where it's regular for them to put in both. So in b'shein v'regel hizika kedarka, if there was a regular, was b'shein, or b'regel kedarka. Regel, no, when a person, the animal walks regularly, or the animal goes and intentionally kicks. So that would be regel shlei kedarka. So in b'shein v'regel hizika kedarka, so it was kedarka, it's areza potter. Why? Mipnei sheyesh lo rishus lahalach kan v'kan. No, the behema has rishus to walk in these places. And it's very regular, so knows in the rishus that the behema has to walk in this rishus arabim, or in this place that's a chotzer shel shneim. So the behema has rishus to walk there, and therefore it's regular for this to happen. That's talking about if it was mazik shein v'regel. However, so it was doing something which wasn't regular for it to do. It was doing something which intentionally was mazik. So then, in Tameh, Mishalem Chatzinezek, the Mu'edis Nezik Shalom. Says, let's again. The din is that generally a Mu'ed pays a Nezik Shalom, a Tam pays a Chatzinezek. Now this din, if the Nizik went into the Rishus of the Mazik, he's potter. If the Mazik went into the Rishus of Nizik, then they're Chayiv. And they're Chayiv Taka the same thing. Hashem V'regel is Chayiv and Nezik Shalom, and a Mu'ed is Chayiv a Chatzinezek. Even when the Mazik went into the Rishus of the Nizik. Now, if Lepel, the Mazik didn't go into the Rishus of the Nizik, and the Nizik didn't go into the Rishus of the Mazik, so here there's a difference. If the Behemah was Mazik, let's say in Rishus Harabim, or Rishus Shehi Shel Shneim, or Rishus She'ena Shel Shneim, you have three situations. So then, it depends. Benegeh Shein V'regel, so it's Potter. It's a Potter. And the reason why he's Potter, so Rambam is Masber, because Lepel, since the Behemah has a right to go there, and it's regular for the Behemah to be Mazik through Shein V'regel, so therefore, Bepashtus, it means that the Nizik should have washed out, because it's in the Rishus, since it's regular for the Behemah to walk here, so B'meila, it's regular for the Behemah to eat, so you can't expect that the Behemah should walk here and not eat. So therefore, if you don't want him to eat, so you have to make sure that the Nizik has to make sure not to eat. That's the Pashtus Advar. Because yesh mipnei sheyesh lo rishus lahalach kan v'kan. And in that rishus lies that the behemoth is going to eat. That's talking about only if it did something which was regular for the behemoth to do. Masha'inkin, if the behemoth went ahead and intentionally was mazik, that wasn't already like a part of the regular rishus, so to speak, the behemoth having rishus to go there. So therefore, then he has to pay a regular din. Then the din of Karen, the din of Karen in these three Yeshuyas is the same din of a Karen in Rishus HaNizik. There's no difference between a Karen in Rishus HaNizik and a Karen in Rishus HaRabim or Rishus She'ena Shel Shneim or Rishus Shehi Shel Shneim. Now there's a dion over here. There's two dionim over. There's one dion is the Rambam says the reason why Shein V'regel is potter in these three places is because he has Rishus to go there. The question is, L'chura, the Rambam also speaks about a Rishus She'ena Shel Shneim. So be'emes, he doesn't really have Rishus. He has as much Rishus as the Mazik has as much Rishus to be here as the Nizik has. But to say that the reason why the Mazik is potter on Shein V'regel is because he has Rishus to be there, it's a little hard to understand when we're talking about a Rishus She'ena Shel Shneim. And then there's be'emes a whole dion, b'negea, this idea of explaining why Shein V'regel is potter b'Rishus HaRabim. The Pasha is Xer Sakosa. The Pasuk says, Ubir b'steyacher. Ubir b'steyacher. That's why it's potter b'Rishus HaRabim, which is really a dion. The Rif Taka says that the reason is because it's the derech, And be'emes they ask, the kasha is asked that l'chura, what do we need a tam? L'chura the pasuk says, ubir b'stei acher. So b'meila in the achreinim it's a whole deal on b'negeya. If you have l'moshel a stick in Rishus Harabim, and the behemoth is walking on the Rishus Harabim, he steps on a stick, and through that stick in the Rishus Harabim, he's mazik something in the Rishus Hayochet. So if you're saying it's mitzad the din of a zeres hakosov that you only mazik in Rishus Hayochet, not in Rishus Harabim, so the pale over here was mazik in Rishus Harabim, in Rishus Hayochet. So b'meila could be, it should be chayiv. Again, there's a long stick that's going from the Rishus Hayochet to the Rishus Harabim. The behemoth walks in the Rishus Harabim, and he steps on a stick, and through that is mazik in the Rishus Hayochet. So the question is, the behemoth chayiv or potter? So if the reason why the behemoth is potter in Rishus Hayochet is in Rishus Harabim is Gzeres HaKosov, so the Gzeres HaKosov is only if he was mazik in Rishus Harabim. If he was mazik in the Rishus Hayochet, even though he was mazik through a stick, stepping on a stick in the Rishus Harabim, Pasha should be chayiv. Masha'enkin, if the reason why he's potter for Rishus Harabim is because it's the derech to walk in the Rishus Harabim, so Mela, since the derech to walk in the Rishus Harabim, the fact that this stick is sticking out also in Rishus Hayochet and was mazik, but the same reason for being mazik in Rishus Harabim being potter, so for that same reason it'll be mazik in the case where the stick was sticking out from Rishus Harabim Rishus Hayochet. That's the deal. The Yam Shleima talks about it. It's going to get to the Rif and the Rosh and the Yam Shleima. But I'll call upon in the Rambam over here. The Rambam just writes the pashtus that the reason why you're potter in Shem V'Regel in Rishus Harabim because mipnei sheyeshlam rishus lahaluk l'kan or l'kan. So the medayik that l'chura, according to the Rambam also, if the reason is yeshlam rishus, so if you have an eitz oruch which is going from the Rishus Harabim to Rishus Hayochet, it should also be potter, which will be a shtickle stira to maybe the next parak which we'll learn b'hemshach. But I'll call upon him nachamol. The Rambam says that in the Rishus Harabim, a chotzer shein shneim and a chotzer sheish shel shneim, so you potter on Shem V'Regel and you chayiv on Keren. That's what he's saying. That's this din. Masha'en kein. That's this din. Halacha tes. Hoysa hachotzer shel shneim miyuchedes lepeiros aber v'lei lahachnos b'behem. It was clear that the rights were only to bring in peiros, but not for behemoths. And lepeil v'hichnu sham echad men ashut from behemtei v'hizika is chayv afil al Hashem b'al regel, because he has no permission to go there. It's b'pashtus, because the Ram said the reason why he's potter is because he has rishus to go there. He doesn't have rishus. The behemoth has no rishus to go there. V'chein im hoysem yuchedes lebehem l'shneim. Both of them were able to bring in behemoths. Abevayir rishus leechad men bulvad lahachnus b'peiros. But only one of them had rishus lahachnus b'peiros. So the churah is as far as to say, since he has rishus to bring in a behemoth, so Lepel he should be potter, but Lepel only one of them has rishus to bring peiros. So Mefarshim explain that since he is the only one that has rishus to bring peiros, so it lies in that, and that rishus means that he has more rishus than the other one. He has rishus to bring in peiros, which means that that person, when he brings in his behemoth, has to make sure not to be mazik the peiros. And if they both have a rishus to put in peiros, and they both have a rishus to bring a behemoth, so the pshat is that they both have a rishus to bring whatever they bring in, and Memela, the Baal HaBehem has to make sure not to be mazik the peiros. Masha'en kein a fakert. I mean, the Baal HaPeiros has to make sure fakert. The Baal HaPeiros has to make sure that the Baal HaBehem shouldn't be mazik him because he has rishus to be there. Masha'en kein, if the Baal HaPeiros is the only one that has rishus to bring in the peiros, the other one doesn't have rishus to bring in the peiros. So in that rishus lies the pashtus advarim is that he has rishus to bring in peiros. And the other person, even though he has rishus to bring in a behemoth, but he has to bring in a behemoth b'eifin kozeh, that he shouldn't be mazik the Baal HaPeiros. That's what we're saying. V'chein lachamol, v'chein em hoysim yuchedes lebehemoth l'shneim, aber v'hoyer rishus le'echad men bulvad lahachnos b'peiros v'yizika peiresov. So then it's chayav ala shein v'ala regel. Halacha yud. Shleisha ovis nezikin b'sher. A share has 3 ovis nezikin. 3 ovis nezikin. 3 nezikin which the Torah clearly talks about. HaKeren, when the behemoth is mazik with its keren, and B'hashein it's mazik with its tooth, and B'haregel it's mazik with his feet. Now that's the pashtus when a behemoth gores with its keren. That's the av of keren, and al derezeh when the behemoth eats with its teeth. So that's the av of shein, and if the behemoth is mazik through walking, so that's the av of regel. Now, tuldas hakeren, the tulda of keren, is negifa, neshicha, revitzu, beita. Pashtus, all these are kavanosi lahazik. he's intending of being mazik, he's not having ano, the gif and the shichar of itzu beita is all acts of being mazik, they're tuldas of keren. Now tuldas hashein, which the idea of a shein is that a behemoth is being mazik with the intent of having ano, so that's a nischachacha b'kesel anosa, it was rubbing its back on a wall, lahanosa, and v'hizika b'chichucha, through the fact that it was rubbing its back on the wall, he was mazik, either the wall fell down or whatever. V'cheinem tinfa peiris lahanosa, it caused peiris to become dirty lahanosa. So there's machlekes, but the pashtus advarim were learning that the behemoth was rolling on the peiris. So Mela was giving its pleasure, and there was a certain, maybe the juice that was oozing out of the peiris was giving the behemoth hanoah. But I'll call upon him through that it was tin for peiris. And then tuldas haregel, that's tuldas of that's one of the tuldas of shame. This chacha bekes lanosa, tin for peiris lanosa, and tuldas haregel is ezika begufa derech not with its feet but with its body. Eshezika besaora derech hilucha, while it was passing by, if the hair of the animal was mazik, a kishkisha biznova, or it made it moved its tail and its tail back and forth, and through that it was mazik. A ba'ukav shola, or through the saddle that was on the behemoth, beprumbi yeshabepia, with the bit that was in its mouth, or bezug shebetzavara, with the bell that was on its neck. Whereas the behemoth was passing, it had no intention of being mazik, and while it was just moving through, so these articles, either the feet of the behemoth, that's the av, or the body of the behemoth, or the tail of the behemoth, or pieces that were on the behemoth, the bit of the behemoth's mouth, or all of these things were mazik, so that's considered a tulda of regel. V'chein, chamer shehizik masoy b'shasi luche, a donkey that was loaded, and the load of the donkey caused hezik while the behemoth, the chamer was walking, or ve'egla hamisheches bekarin, if you have a little calf that's pulling a wagon, shehizika b'shas mishichosa, and that wagon was mazik b'shas mishichosa, is kol elu, all of these things is tuldas regelin, and therefore b'shus harabim pturim, or b'shus hanizik mishalman nezik shalom. So that's the din of regel, as we learned before, that a regel is potter b'shus harabim, and a b'shus hanizik is mazik mishalman nezik shalom. Now, so again, a keren is mishalman sayin b'shus hanizik and shayin b'shus hamazik. But it's always a chatzi nezik, and it's migufa. Mashenk and shem v'regel is only mishalim b'shus hanizik, and then it pays a nezik shalim, and then it's mi'aliyah, even mi'aliyah or from meitim the chasaf. Mashenk, if it's rishus hayachid, it's completely pot. Halacha yudalev kishkisha biznova kishkus rav shein darka la'asei sitomed v'zika b'shus harab. So until now we're learning that keren means kavanasi lazik, something that was kavanasi lazik, either negicha, negifa, neshicha, reviso, beita, they were all kavanasi lazik. Here we're talking about something which pashtus is not kavanasi lazik. It's something which is very unusual. It was kishkush biznova, it shook with its zona, with its tail. So kishkush biznova, regular kishkush, we learned before, that's considered, that was an halacha yud, that's part of regel. It's regular for the behemoth to give a shokel with its tail. Masha'inkin, if it was a kishkush rav, she'in darka la'seisi tomet, and lepel, as a result of that, it was a zika, b'rishus harabim, or it was kishkusha, not with the tail, but begitshalo, and also b'rishus harabim v'hizika. So over here is potter. Why is it potter? Because there's a svara that it's shem v'regel, it's regel, and memela regel b'rishus harabim potter. However, v'im tofas hanigazik, if the nizik was tefis, because there was a tfisa, so the Rambam holds b'chlal that when there's a suffix moment, so memela tfisa helps. So v'im tofas hanizik is geva chatzi nezik mimasha tofas. He has to be, he could be geva a chatzi nezik. At very most, it'll be chayav a chatzi nezik. If it's shein, so he's potter b'shus harabim. Elamai, it's keren. If it's keren, he's only chayav a chatzi nezik. So lepel, since it's a suffix, so he's not chayav. But since lepel, there's a suffix, maybe he is chayav. So if he was tefis, he could keep a half a nezik. Geva chatzi nezik mimasha tofas. Why? Shezeh adover suffix who ela tuldas hakeren. There's a suffix whether it's tuldas hakeren. The Rambam is not mazb what the suffix is, because the pashtus is that it's not kavanasi lahazik, but on the other hand, it's unusual. So the question is if this unusual act goes into the gather of tuldas hakeren. In elu tuldas hakeren shechayavin eleh b'rishus harabim, a tuldas haregel, or maybe it goes into the gather of tuldas haregel shepotter eleh b'rishus harabim kimei shebiyarnu. So this is a suffix. The pashtus of the suffix is because it's unusual. The question is the suffix whether an unusual act is Karen, or is the suffix is whether this is unusual enough to be considered a terribly unusual act, and therefore goes into the Karen, which is Bepashtus. The words knows it's tak unusual, but maybe in that gufa there's madregas. How unusual does it have to be that it should be considered a tulda of Karen? Now there's just a ha'ara. As we learned that Karen Bechlal will learn Behemsha that a chotzi nezik of Karen is Knas, and Knas you can't be geva unless Bezin Paskin that you should be geva. Whereas Knas Hamedi Beknas is potter, and the chi of Knas doesn't really begin until there's a chi of Bezin. So Mela is always a shaila. How could it be Teifas Knas? There's a suffix whether or not this kishkush has a din of Karen, has a din of Regel. So late the tzad of Regel is potter because in Rishus Harab. Late the tzad of Karen you're chayiv because it's Karen, but you only chayiv once there's a psak din of Bezin. And lechura, how could it be a psak din of Bezin if it's a suffix? So Mela Bezin won't be a psak din. So if there's no psak din, so how could there be tfisa? How could there be a tfisa without a psak din? So you're going to have to lechura say like a dvar chidush that there could be a psak din that there is a suffix chiyuv. In other words, a person calls someone to Bezin, and the person's coming to Bezin and he's timing that he did this and this act, and Bezin says, well, it's a suffix whether this act is chayiv. So Bezin is going to paskin like psachiyuv of knas that there is a suffix that you maybe have a chiyuv knas. Bezin is going to paskin that there's a suffix you have a chiyuv knas. Once Bezin paskins that there's a suffix you have a chiyuv knas, so then there's a shaychus of mitzias of tfisa. But it comes out from here, it's a dvar chidush that there could be a psak din that there's a suffix chiyuv knas, which is a dion in achreinu.